Hello, and welcome to Haunted Slumber. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, haunting stories that gently carry you into the quiet embrace of the night, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, settle in. Let your body grow still and allow the sounds of the outside world to slowly melt into silence. Tonight, the night grows deeper, sleep begins to call, and an old story quietly awakens from the shadows. So close your eyes, listen carefully, take one slow breath, and drift gently into haunted slumber. Story 1. My mom and I lived alone in a small house in the woods. It wasn't the kind of deep wilderness you see in documentaries, where you have to drive for hours to find a gas station. We were close enough to town that a grocery run didn't feel like a trip, but far enough out that our backyard was basically trees, brush, and whatever decided to move through at night. If you stood on the porch in the evening, you could hear things you don't hear in most neighborhoods. The wind rubbing the leaves together like dry hands. Owls calling from somewhere you couldn't point to. The slow, heavy steps of deer when they got bold and came close. Sometimes, if the air was right, you could even hear the distant sounds from the wildlife park that sat way out past the last few houses. It was a strange place to have nearby, because it made the nights feel crowded. Not with people, with life, with movement, with eyes you couldn't see. My mom wasn't strict in the way other parents were. She didn't hover over my shoulder. She didn't check my phone or ask for passwords. If I wanted to stay up on weekends, she'd sigh, remind me I'd regret it in the morning, and let it happen. If I wanted to play games, watch movies, post dumb stuff online, she didn't treat it like a crime. Most of the time, it felt like I had a lot of freedom. That's why the one rule stood out so much. It wasn't don't talk to strangers or be home by dark. It was one rule that sat in our house like a heavy piece of furniture you couldn't move, no matter how much you pretended it wasn't there. I must never, under any circumstances, go into the downstairs bathroom after midnight. Not try not to. Not it's better if you don't. Never. When she first told me, I laughed, because I was a kid, and kids laugh at things that don't make sense. I thought it was one of those silly stories adults make up to keep you from doing something they don't want you to do. Like saying the TV will explode if you sit too close, or that the ice cream truck music means they're out of ice cream. But my mom didn't say it like a joke. She didn't even say it like a warning you could ignore. She said it like a fact, like gravity, like fire being hot. And she didn't just tell me. She acted like that bathroom was a real problem with real consequences. Every night, no matter how tired she was, she would go downstairs before bed and lock that bathroom door like she was sealing up a cage. Not once, not twice. She'd lock it, then check it, then lock the little chain above the knob. Sometimes she'd push against the door as if she expected something to push back. There were nights I'd hear her go back down a few minutes later, quietly, like she wasn't sure she'd done it right the first time. I would lie in bed and pretend I was asleep, because I didn't want her to catch me watching. But I always listened. The click of the lock. The light, careful step away from the door. The way her breathing sounded different when she came back up the stairs, like she'd been holding it. As a kid, that kind of thing eats at you. You can't help it. The more someone tells you not to look, the more you want to look. The more they treat something like a secret, the more your mind starts building stories around it. My imagination worked overtime. Was there a snake in there? A raccoon? A swarm of insects? A hole in the floor that led somewhere? I tried to make it something normal, something that fit into a child's world. But her fear didn't feel normal. It felt old. It felt practiced. During the day, the bathroom looked ordinary. Just a small room under the stairs with a sink, toilet, and a narrow mirror that always seemed a little too high for me. Sometimes I'd pass by and see the door closed, and I'd get that itch of curiosity again. It didn't help that the door was always shut, like it was hiding something embarrassing. And I was 9. 9-year-olds believe the world is full of hidden doors and secret rules. I tried to get in more than once. Not all at once. Not like some big plan. Just little attempts when she was distracted. I'd twist the knob and feel it hold firm. I'd check the chain, stare at it like I could use my eyes to undo it. Once I even tried to slide a butter knife into the crack like I'd seen someone do in a movie. It didn't work. It just made a small scratch in the paint and made me feel guilty for about 5 minutes before curiosity took over again. I told myself I just wanted to prove there was nothing there, that my mom was being paranoid, that it was a control thing, that she was trying to keep me from sneaking downstairs to watch TV late at night. I built all kinds of explanations, because the real one never crossed my mind. Then came the night I finally had the chance. It was stormy, the kind of storm that makes the windows rattle and turns the trees into moving shadows. Rain hit the roof in waves. The wind didn't just blow, it shoved. Every now and then there'd be a flash of lightning that made the whole living room glow pale for a second, then drop back into darkness. My mom had gone out to do some shopping. It wasn't supposed to be late. She said she'd be back before dark, and I believed her. She always tried to keep her promises. But the weather got worse. The roads out there can turn slick fast, and there are stretches where deer wander out like they own the place. She texted me that she was delayed. Then she texted again that she was still stuck. Then nothing for a while. I sat on the couch with a blanket, watching the storm through the front window, feeling that restless feeling kids get when the house is too quiet. The TV was on, but I wasn't really watching it. Every sound the house made seemed louder. The pipes ticking, the fridge humming, the occasional creak of the wood as the wind pushed the house. And then, without me even meaning to, I noticed the time, 11:58. 11:59. My heart started beating harder, not because I was scared, but because I knew the rule and I knew, for once, no one was there to enforce it. I kept thinking, she'll come home any minute, and I'll miss my chance. It felt like I was standing near the edge of a pool, daring myself to jump. Midnight came. The clock changed over with a soft click I could hear in my head, even if I couldn't hear it in the room. The downstairs bathroom door was not locked. That was the thing that made it feel like fate, like the universe was giving me a moment. Normally, even before midnight, that door would be secured, but my mom hadn't been there to do it. The door was just a door, normal, waiting so. I did what a 9-year-old does when a forbidden door is suddenly available. I went downstairs. I moved quietly, like being quiet would make it less real. I told myself I was being smart, like a spy, but really I was just afraid my courage would run out if I made too much noise. The air downstairs felt different as soon as my foot hit the last step. It was cooler, and not in a refreshing way. More like the house had taken a slow breath and decided not to let it go. I remember thinking the living room looked wrong. Not changed, Not rearranged, just wrong. Like the shadows were thicker, like the corners had more weight to them. The storm outside kept throwing moving light across the walls, and every time the lightning flashed, I'd see the outline of furniture too clearly. Then it would vanish again into dimness. I tried to laugh it off in my head. It's just a bathroom, I told myself. It's just a room. I walked down the hallway toward the door under the stairs. The closer I got, the more I felt that cold, crawling feeling in my skin. Like I was walking into a place my body didn't want to go. My hand hovered near the knob, and I hesitated for one last moment. That's when I heard it, a thump. Not the storm, not the house settling. A thump from the other side of the bathroom door, low and dull, like something heavy shifted its weight. I froze with my fingers inches from the knob. I held my breath and listened, waiting for it to happen again. For a second, there was only rain and wind. Then another sound came, softer, like a dragging movement, like something rubbing against the inside of the wall. My mouth went dry. My brain tried to label it. Pipe, vent, something loose. An animal. But it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like someone trying to be quiet and failing. I should have run upstairs right then. That would have been the smart choice. That would have been the choice my mom wanted me to make. But my hand moved anyway. I don't know if it was stubbornness or curiosity or some stupid child need to prove adults wrong. I turned the knob and opened the door. The bathroom was dark. Not its nighttime dark. It was a thick, heavy darkness that seemed to sit in the room like smoke. I reached for the light switch and flicked it on. Nothing. I flicked it again, harder, and again. Still nothing. The storm must have knocked something out, I told myself, even though the rest of the house still had power. The TV had been on. The lights in the kitchen had worked. I stepped inside, just one step, and the air changed around me. It smelled stale and wet, like a basement that hasn't been opened in a long time. The darkness in there felt close enough to touch. Then the door shut behind me. It didn't slam. It didn't bang like a horror movie. It just closed, calm and firm, like someone had pushed it with a steady hand. The click of the latch sounded too loud. For a second, I didn't move. I stood there, staring into the black room, my back to the door, feeling the shape of the space around me without seeing it. I told myself I had bumped it with my foot, that it had swung shut on its own. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. My hands went out in front of me, searching the air for something familiar. The sink should be to the left. The counter edge. The little cup where my mom kept spare toothbrushes. Somewhere near there, inside the cabinet, was a small flashlight she used when the power went out. I reached, patting the counter, and my fingertips brushed cold porcelain. I moved along it, trying not to panic, trying not to imagine what might be standing in the dark with me. Then I heard another sound, higher up. A faint scratch, a shifting noise. I lifted my head slowly, and the sound came again, clearer this time. It was coming from the vent. Above the sink there was a rectangular vent cover, the kind you barely notice. I'd looked at it 1,000 times without really seeing it. Now it sounded like something was moving inside it, not fluttering like a bird, not the light scurry of a mouse. It sounded like slow crawling, like limbs pulling a body through a tight space. I stood there with my hands hovering over the counter, and I realized I couldn't hear the storm anymore. I mean, it was still outside, but in that moment it felt distant, like I was underwater and the world was above the surface. The only sound that mattered was the crawling in that vent. It paused. Everything in me begged for the light to come on. I flicked the switch again, even though I knew it wouldn't work. The click was sharp in the dark. The vent stayed silent for half a second. Then the crawling started again, and this time it was closer, like whatever was inside had moved toward the opening. I didn't wait to find the flashlight. I didn't even wait to think. My body decided for me. I spun around, grabbed the door handle, and yanked. For the smallest moment it felt stuck, like the door didn't want to open, and the fear hit me so hard my eyes watered. Then it gave, and I stumbled out into the hallway. I slammed the door behind me, not even caring how much noise I made. I ran. I ran up the stairs like the house was on fire. I didn't look back. I didn't stop at the top. I just kept moving through the living room to the front door. I threw it open and went outside into the storm. Rain hit my face and soaked my shirt in seconds. The wind grabbed at me. Thunder rolled overhead. I stood on the porch with my chest heaving, and I let myself be drenched because it made me feel real again. The cold rain, the slap of it on my skin, the smell of wet earth, the noise of the storm, all of it reminded me that I was still in the world I understood. I stayed out there until I couldn't stop shaking. When my mom finally came home, she was stressed and tired and annoyed at the weather. She asked why I was wet, and I lied. I told her I'd gone out because I heard something near the trash can. I told her I'd slipped in the mud. I don't even remember what excuse I used, just that I didn't tell her the truth. Because the truth felt impossible to say. How do you tell your mom you went into the bathroom after midnight and heard something crawling in the vent like it was waiting for you? And some part of me didn't want her to confirm it. I didn't want to see her face change. I didn't want to hear her say, "I told you so," in a voice that meant something else. So I kept it to myself. I never tried that door again. Not once. If I needed a bathroom at night, I went upstairs. If I forgot and started down the hall, I'd stop and turn around like I'd bumped into an invisible wall. The rule stopped feeling like a silly story. It became a boundary I didn't question. It became one of those things you live with without understanding, because understanding feels worse. Years passed. We eventually moved away from that house. I grew up. The memory dulled around the edges the way old memories do, like a photograph left in the sun too long. It didn't disappear, but it stopped feeling like it could reach out and touch my life. Until college. Now I live in my own apartment, the kind of place that looks clean and normal and forgettable. Beige walls, cheap carpet, a small bathroom with a fan that makes a tired, whining noise when you turn it on. Neighbors I barely know, the kind of building where you hear footsteps above you and someone's TV through the wall and you stop noticing after a while. For a long time, everything was fine. I didn't think about my old house much. I didn't think about that bathroom door or the darkness or the vent. Then a few weeks ago, I started hearing noises. At first, it was easy to ignore. Apartment buildings have sounds. Pipes knock. Air ducts tick as they heat up and cool down. Sometimes you hear something in the wall and you assume it's a mouse or a squirrel. I told myself that's all it was, but the sound was too familiar. Late at night, usually when everything else had gone quiet, I'd hear this slow movement in the vents. Not a quick scamper, not a flutter, a careful crawl, as if something was dragging itself through a tight space. Every now and then there would be a thud, not loud enough to wake the whole building, but heavy enough to make my stomach tighten, like something inside the duct had bumped down against the metal. Twice I reported it to management. I told them I thought there might be a raccoon in the ductwork, because that's what a reasonable person would say. That's what you tell yourself so you can still sleep. They said they'd look into it. They said it was probably nothing. They said they'd send someone. No one came. Or if they did, they didn't find anything. The noises kept happening. I tried to be normal about it. I bought a cheap vent cover for the bathroom fan. I looked up how vents connect in apartment buildings. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I was tired, and my brain was turning normal sounds into something scary because of an old childhood memory. But there was one detail I couldn't explain away. The cold. Some nights, especially when the crawling was happening, my apartment would feel too cold in a way that didn't match the thermostat. It wasn't just the air. It was the feeling of cold sitting in the room like a presence, like the space around me was holding still on purpose. Tonight is one of those nights. It's storming again, which I hate because it makes the whole world sound like that childhood night. Rain against windows, wind pushing at the building, the low, steady growl of thunder. I should be used to storms, but my body reacts like it remembers something my mind wants to forget. For most of the evening, the crawling came and went. Soft at first, then clearer, then gone. I kept trying to focus on other things, homework, videos, scrolling on my phone, but my attention kept snapping back to the vent like a dog hearing something behind a wall. Earlier, I took a shower because I couldn't put it off anymore. The bathroom in my apartment is small, and the vent is right above the sink, not far from the shower curtain. The whole time the water ran, I kept listening over the sound of it, straining for that telltale movement. And I heard it, not in the wall across the room, not down the hallway, right there, right above the sink. Slow crawling, but careful shifting, like something stopping and starting, reacting to me being in the room. The sound came closer, then paused, then continued. It was so clear that when I turned off the water, the silence felt like a trap. Then it stopped completely. That was worse than the noise. Now I'm sitting on my bed writing this, because I don't know what else to do with my hands. The apartment feels too still. The air feels heavy, like it's waiting for a decision. The storm outside keeps making the shadows move across my walls, and every time lightning flashes, the room looks sharp and flat for a second, like a stage set. I keep looking toward the bathroom door. It's so stupid, because it's just a bathroom. It's not like the one from my childhood, not really. Different building, different town, different life. There is no reason for the same fear to follow me here. And yet my skin knows that sound. My stomach knows that silence. I don't dare go into that bathroom right now. I'm sitting here telling myself I can hold it. I can wait until morning. I can keep the door shut and pretend the vent is just a vent, and the thuds are just settling metal, and the cold is just bad insulation. But I also know I'll have to go in there eventually. I'll need to use the toilet. I'll need to wash my hands. I'll need to take another shower tomorrow. A bathroom isn't something you can avoid forever. And the worst part is this feeling, deep and steady, that whatever is in those vents understands that too. It can wait. It has all night. It's almost midnight again. And I can't stop thinking about my mom triple locking that old door night after night, like she was holding something back, like she was buying us time, like she knew exactly what happened after the clock crossed over. I keep telling myself I'm not 9 anymore. I keep telling myself I'm safe in a building full of people, with lights that work and locks that click and neighbors who would hear me if I yelled. But the apartment is cold, and the vent above the sink is silent, and the storm keeps pressing against the windows, and I can't shake the thought that it isn't trapped in the old house. It never was. It just needed me to grow up enough to live somewhere it could reach me again, without my mom standing between us and a locked door after midnight. Story 2, I'm writing this because I need someone to understand why I did what I did. I'm not asking to be forgiven. I don't even think I deserve that. I just couldn't stand the idea of people making up their own stories about me, like I was some mystery for them to solve. Don't forgive me. Just try to understand. I hate them. The ones that fly, the ones that buzz, the ones that crawl and climb and squeeze into cracks. I hate every single one. And the worst part is, I always felt like they hated me too. Their dark eyes that don't look like real eyes. Their hard shells. The little hairs on their bodies that catch the light when they move. The wrong way their joints bend. The mouths that open like tiny machines. The way they move without emotion, like they're built for one purpose. Everything about them made me sick. When I was little, just being near one insect could throw me into a panic so bad it took hours to come back down. My chest would lock up, my skin would crawl, my thoughts would turn into noise, and my body would act like I was about to die. They wrote down labels for me: severe trauma, anxiety, and selective muteness, which is just a cleaner way to say I couldn't always talk even when I wanted to. When adoption papers came up, those words meant high risk. They meant I was hard to place. They meant I was too much. In the care facility, I watched kids come and go like it was normal. Friends I made would get moved to foster homes or group homes or adopted out. After a while, I stopped trying. I wasn't good at being the kid people picked anyway. I was quiet. I was jumpy. I flinched when people moved too fast. I had nightmares that turned me into a shaking mess, and I didn't know how to explain them. But there was one thing about the facility that made it feel safe. There were barely any bugs inside. The place was clean, bright, and almost sterile. The floors smelled like cleaning products. The windows were shut tight. The lights worked. The air felt controlled. It was quiet in a way I wasn't used to, and the staff were kinder than anyone I'd known before. I could watch cartoons. I had toys. I had a bed with real blankets. On Wednesdays, we got chocolate pudding. And that sounds small, but it felt like proof that the world could have rules and routines, that good things could happen on purpose. So when they told me a foster family had applied to take me, I didn't feel excited. I felt like someone was trying to pull me out of the only safe place I'd ever had. I told my caseworker I already had everything I needed. I told her I had my own bed and coloring books, and I could watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles whenever I wanted. I said it like it was a legal argument, like if I listed enough reasons they'd have to let me stay. She listened, and then told me I would have all that and more in a real home. It took a lot of convincing. It took a few breakdowns. It took me crying until I was empty and still shaking. But then I met them. They didn't look at me like I was a problem to solve. They looked at me like I was a kid. They didn't act scared of my silence. They spoke softly. They waited for me to nod instead of forcing words out of me. They said they wanted me there. And they meant it. My therapist was thrilled when I started showing curiosity instead of only fear. I think she saw it as a sign that maybe I could heal. I wanted to believe that too. They were willing to take me in with all my cracks, and even now I know that kind of love is rare. Living with them was harder than I expected though. A new house meant new sounds, new smells, new corners where anything could be hiding. My fear of bugs got worse at first, not better. The anxiety of a new home made my brain search for danger everywhere. Still, they tried so hard. They kept things clean. They sealed cracks. They checked windows and screens. They didn't leave food out. They protected me from bugs like it was a serious job. And I was grateful in a way I didn't know how to say out loud. It never hit me until later how little experience I had with normal adults. Adults who didn't make my stomach drop. Adults I could speak to without feeling like something bad was about to happen. Adults who actually listened. I guess I'd never really seen what parents were supposed to be. My real mother was nothing like my foster mom. My real mom slept most of the time. She could sleep through whole days. Sometimes she only got up when one of her boyfriends came around. That's what she called them, her boyfriends. Men who showed up every couple days, sometimes more than one. Sometimes they were mean. Mostly they acted like I wasn't there. They walked over piles of clothes and trash like it was normal. They talked over me, around me, through me. The apartment was always a mess. Garbage, old food, dirty laundry, random piles of things my mom swore she would sell later, but she never did. The walls had chipped paint and holes in them. Some were small, some were big, like somebody had thrown something or punched straight through. White drywall dust sat on the stained carpet in little piles, like snow that never melted. It was proof that something violent had happened there, even if no one talked about it. And through all of that, the worst thing was the bugs. Rotting carpet, trash, spoiled food, damp corners. That apartment was like a safe place for insects. Roaches moved around like they owned it. Flies and mosquitoes filled the air when it was warm. Bedbugs seemed endless, like they could reproduce faster than time itself. Their bites turned my skin into a map of red bumps. The sound of buzzing made my nerves light up like sparks. Even when I couldn't see them, I could feel them. Or I thought I could. My brain never stopped scanning. I was barely 7 back then. I was only allowed out of the apartment sometimes, usually to get ice or use the vending machine down the hall. I didn't go to normal places like other kids. I didn't have school the way I should have. I was trapped, and I stayed trapped partly because I was scared of the world, but mostly because I was terrified of upsetting my mother. When I moved into my foster home, I became very aware of how I acted. I started feeling guilty about it, like I was doing something wrong by being the way I was. I knew my fear wasn't logical. I knew other kids didn't live like this, but my foster parents were patient anyway. My fear of lice was so intense that I had to keep my hair buzzed short. I hated how it looked. It made me feel ugly. But if my hair got even a little longer, the feeling of it brushing my neck or my face could make me spiral. I'd start scratching like my body was trying to dig its way out of itself until my skin burned and bled. Dust and lint messed with my head too. A tiny speck on the sheet could become an infestation in my mind in seconds. I would strip my bed and make it again and again until I was sure the mattress was perfectly clean. I'd scrub the room top to bottom, sometimes for hours, chasing a feeling of safety that always stayed just out of reach. I expected to get in trouble for it, but my foster mom didn't scold me. She brought me a bucket of cleaning supplies. She offered to help. She taught me how to clean for real, what to use on what, and what chemicals not to mix. She treated my fear like something that could be handled, not something that made me bad. For a while, that was enough. I couldn't go outside without breaking down, but inside the house I started to relax. I could walk from room to room without panicking. I still didn't talk much, but my foster mom filled the silence like it didn't bother her. She told me if I could nod yes or no, she could do the rest. I wanted to make her proud. I promised myself I would get better, even if it was only for her. My old place never stopped living inside my memory, though. At my mom's apartment, I slept on a bare mattress on the floor. No fitted sheet, no clean blanket. Bedbugs lived in the seams like an army. I'd wake up itching and sore, covered in bites. If I cried enough, sometimes my mom would tell one of her boyfriends to spray the mattress with Raid. It didn't solve anything. It just made my lungs burn. But for a moment I'd feel like something had been done, like someone cared. I used to leave a light on all night because I thought it would keep roaches away. Then I realized they could get used to the light. They'd still come out, walking across the walls, across the floor, across everything. The sprays never mattered. Nothing could fight the garbage and decay that filled that apartment. The smell stuck to my clothes and skin, mold, mildew, old smoke. I barely noticed those smells after a while, but there was one smell I never got used to. My mom's medicine. At least once a week, smoke would come from her room, a sharp chemical burn that cut through everything else. It made me dizzy. It usually meant she was about to start one of her long sleeping stretches. She told me she was sick and needed the medicine or she would die. She sold anything that could get money. If I begged her not to sell something, she'd say, "You don't want your mommy to die, do you?" I started breaking my own toys on purpose so they wouldn't be worth selling. I hid the one DVD I owned like it was treasure. It was season 1 of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. One of her boyfriends found it cheap for me, probably to keep me quiet. But it meant everything. I played it over and over on a tiny DVD player until I could hear the theme song in my head even when it wasn't playing. After my mom took her medicine, she'd spend days in bed. She couldn't hold a conversation. She'd fall asleep mid-sentence and wake up confused. During those days, I had to fend for myself, but honestly, those days were safer than when she was awake and angry. When she went too long without it, she became unpredictable. She'd swing between moods like a broken light flickering on and off. Sometimes she'd become supermom for a day. She'd buy me something, feed me, bathe me, act kind. Those were the days that made me the most anxious, because I could feel how thin and fake it was. Like kindness was a mask stretched over something dangerous. I never knew when it would snap back. Sometimes, in my head, I wished she would die. Then I'd feel sick with guilt for even thinking it. Food was never steady in that apartment. Meals were chips, cheap pizza, whatever could be grabbed fast. A lot of nights I went to sleep hungry. I was thin even for a kid. Sometimes the men who came around felt a little pity and gave me a candy bar or a few dollars for the vending machine. But it was never more than that. I learned not to tell my mom I was hungry. That set her off the quickest. She'd call me ungrateful. She'd say she must be the worst mother in the world. Like she wanted me to argue with her and comfort her. And I did. I would lie and tell her she was a good mom, tell her everything was okay, tell her I loved her, because I knew how fast her crying could turn into hatred. The lice and bed bugs got so bad that I stopped sleeping on the mattress. I started sleeping in the bathtub. I'd put blankets and pillows down to make the cold tub bearable. I'd fall asleep under the buzz of the bathroom fan, using it like a sound blanket so I didn't have to hear everything else happening in the apartment at night. All of that followed me into my foster home in ways I didn't expect. At first, when I finally saw a bug inside the new house, something in me snapped. I got so angry that the fear almost couldn't breathe. Even though my whole body screamed at me to run, I charged at it and crushed it under my shoe. I dropped to my knees right after. I thought I was about to spiral into a full episode, shaking and crying until I was empty. My stomach rolled, my heart pounded. I waited for the panic to swallow me, but instead, something else happened. The fear didn't grow. It vanished. And in its place came a rush that felt warm and bright and powerful. Satisfaction, relief so strong it felt like winning, like taking back something that had been stolen from me. When I told my foster parents, they were proud. They celebrated it like a milestone. They thought it meant I was getting better, and a part of me believed that too. I liked the feeling of making them happy. I liked the feeling of control. The next day, I searched the house for another bug, not because I was afraid anymore, but because I wanted that feeling again. When I found one, I crushed it. The rush came back, tingling under my skin, like my body had been holding its breath for years and finally let go. After that, it became my new focus. I started checking corners, windowsills, dusty places. Every bug I killed felt like another step away from the old apartment. I walked around the house with less fear. I started talking more. I even started playing with my foster siblings. But the anxiety didn't disappear. It changed shape. If I went a whole day without killing a bug, panic started crawling back into me. It wasn't the old fear of bugs exactly. It was more like a craving, like an itch under my skin that couldn't be ignored. And when the house didn't have enough bugs to satisfy it, I started going outside into the garden. Everyone thought it was progress. They praised me for stepping outside, for being brave, for trying new things. I didn't tell them the truth, that I wasn't going out there to enjoy the sun or touch grass or face my fears. I was hunting. The worst part was that the more I killed, the less the relief lasted. The feeling started fading faster. I needed it more often, and it scared me because it felt like I was turning into my mother, chasing her medicine. I hated that thought so much I tried to stop. Then one day I killed a bug and felt almost nothing. The emptiness hit hard. I fell apart for days. I barely ate. I barely left my room. I felt like I was failing again, like I was letting my foster family down after everything they'd done. The fear that I was broken beyond repair came back stronger than ever. Desperate, I searched for another bug, thinking maybe I could force the relief back. I found a beetle on the back porch. This time, instead of stepping on it, I picked it up. The second it touched my skin, I wanted to throw up. My hand jerked. My stomach turned. It kicked and squirmed against my palm. My vision flashed, and for a moment I wasn't on the porch anymore. In my mind, I saw a swarm of flies around my head, felt myself running, felt the air thick with buzzing. I stumbled back to my room with my eyes squeezed shut. Like if I couldn't see the world, it couldn't hurt me. When I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, the way she looked the last time I ever saw her. Cold fear shot through me. My knees buckled and I hit the floor. Then I opened my eyes. I was in my room. No swarm, no hallway, just me, shaking, with a beetle trapped in my hand. I don't know what made me do it. I didn't plan it. My body moved like it had been waiting for an answer. I opened my hand, grabbed one of the beetle's legs, and pulled. It came off. The beetle flipped and kicked uselessly, and I felt a small wave of relief. Real relief. So I did it again. Another leg. This time there was a wet pull, a bit of soft tissue that made my stomach turn and my own muscles loosened like someone had unclenched my whole body. I kept going, pulling its limbs off one by one, and with each one, the relief grew into something else. Satisfaction. Not just I'm safe now, but something darker. Like I was pouring my pain into that tiny body. Like I was making it carry what I'd carried. Relief and pleasure tangled together, and it felt like a drug. I started experimenting, cutting pieces off, burning them with matches when I could get them, stabbing them, drowning them, though drowning felt messy and slow in a way I didn't like. I used tape to hold them in place. I poked them with needles. Sometimes I heated the needle over a candle first. I was always searching for a new method, a sharper rush, a cleaner release. And unlike squashing, this didn't fade right away. The relief stayed. The craving quieted. My body calmed down like it had finally found the right switch to flip. Even then, I knew it was wrong. I knew normal people didn't do this. But I was terrified of losing the only thing that made the panic stop. I was terrified of being caught. Terrified my foster parents would look at me the way other adults had looked at me before, like I was something bad they'd accidentally brought into their home. I also remember clearly how the worst day of my childhood taught me what bugs could do. Back in the apartment, I spent a lot of time daydreaming because it was the only way to escape. I'd imagine the Ninja Turtles showing up and taking me somewhere else. A real school. A place with pizza and bright lights and clean floors. A place where adults were safe. 1 week the bugs got worse than ever. Flies clustered in every room. Roaches on the walls. The air felt alive. I reached my limit when I woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling of something crawling across my arm. A roach. I started sobbing outside my mom's bedroom door, crying loudly because I was afraid to go in without permission. Usually, after so many days, she would come out needing more of her medicine. But I hadn't been paying attention. Days had passed, and she hadn't left her room at all. I knocked and called her name for what felt like hours. I was too scared to open the door and get hit. I thought about running outside for help, but I was sure I'd be punished for that too. Eventually, through my crying, I heard a dull humming sound from inside her room. It reminded me of the bathroom fan and the ice machine down the hall. It was steady and weirdly calming, and it pulled me toward the door even though I was terrified. I tried the knob. The door pushed against a small pile of clothes and towels. The room was dim and the smell was so bad I pinched my nose shut. Worse than anything else in the apartment. Then I understood what the humming was. A cloud of flies filled the room. Their buzzing was so loud it drowned out everything else. When I stepped inside, the swarm shifted and poured out into the apartment like smoke. There was a single lamp glowing beside the bed. In that sick yellow light, I could see my mother's shape. I climbed onto the bed and crawled toward her, calling her name. When I got near her legs, something cold and wet soaked into my pajamas. The smell made me gag. The liquid felt slimy on my skin. And then I saw her. She was covered in insects, flies, roaches, gnats, more than I'd ever seen in one place. Her face was hidden under moving bodies. like a mask made of crawling things. I tried to shake her, crying and begging, saying, "Mom, wake up, please." But her skin under my hands felt cold. I started batting the bugs away from her face, sobbing as they hit my hands and arms. More crawled out of her nose and eyes, out of places that should not have been open like that. Her face seemed to move, not because she was alive, but because they were. Her mouth hung open, and insects and maggots spilled out with a smell so foul I vomited onto her chest. I kept shaking her anyway, crying until my throat hurt, until I couldn't see through tears. Then I couldn't take the swarm anymore. I ran. I was 9 years old, filthy and starving and screaming for someone to stop the bugs. That memory never left me. It didn't matter how clean my foster home was. It didn't matter how safe it seemed. My brain had learned a lesson it could never unlearn. Bugs weren't just scary. Bugs meant decay. Bugs meant being trapped. Bugs meant no one was coming. By the time I was 12, the bug torture wasn't something I did only when I panicked. I did it because I wanted it. I did it because it felt good. And that's the honest truth. It became my secret life. I started spending my allowance at the pet store. I bought feeder insects, crickets, mealworms, roaches, whatever I could get. I told the workers a lie about having chickens that I hand-fed. I said it so many times it started to feel half real. At one point, I even considered asking my foster parents if we could get chickens, just to make the story true. I kept the insects in containers inside a shoebox along with everything I used. I moved the box constantly, hiding it in new places. I wasn't allowed to have matches or lighters, so I had to steal those too when I could. I stayed up late sometimes, waiting until everyone was asleep so I could have hours alone. I would get irritated when I was interrupted, like a person pulled away from something important. That should have been a warning sign. It should have been obvious. But no one was looking for this. They were looking for the old me, the silent, scared girl. They were proud of the new me, the girl who smiled more, talked more, played more, went outside. I got greedy. I started stealing scissors and kitchen knives. My foster parents noticed things missing. I lied without even thinking. I even blamed my younger foster brother, because who would suspect me? I was older. I was the good kid now, the healing kid. But the craving got worse. If I tried to stop for even one day, I got physically sick. My hands shook. My stomach cramped. My thoughts ran in circles. I would feel like I was crawling out of my own skin. Some sessions lasted hours, and afterward I'd feel calm in a way nothing else gave me. I hated bugs. I loved what they did for me. I hated them, and I needed them. Then my brother found the shoebox. That day I came home with a fresh container of crickets, already thinking about the relief I would get later, already counting down minutes until I'd be alone. When I walked into my room, he was there. He was holding a lighter and a kitchen knife. Things I had stolen, things I had blamed on him. He looked at me and said, in that annoying sing-song way little kids do when they think they've won, "I'm telling Mom, you're in so much trouble." I stepped toward him, and suddenly the room shifted. The sound in my ears changed. All I could hear was buzzing, like a thick storm of flies. I looked at him and saw it, or thought I saw it. His mouth kept moving, but the words disappeared under the sound. I watched insects crawl over the edges of his face toward his mouth and eyes. I saw them pushing into him, wriggling under skin that wasn't supposed to move like that. I screamed. I couldn't stop screaming. No more bugs. I shouted. like the words could erase what I was seeing. He dropped the knife and lighter when I lunged, but I grabbed the knife first. In my mind, the swarm was killing him. In my mind, I had seconds. In my mind, I wasn't attacking my brother. I was saving him. I was killing the bugs. I pinned him down. He thrashed and cried. I kept screaming, "Stop it. No more." I stabbed downward at the swarm, again and again, feeling crunching and wetness, feeling something give way under the blade. I was sure I was hitting hard shells, sure I was cutting through crawling bodies. I was desperate to clear his face, to stop them from getting inside him, to make it all stop. No more bugs. I didn't notice the sound change. I didn't notice the buzzing fading. I didn't notice that I wasn't fighting insects. I only stopped when my arm shook too hard to lift the knife again, when the handle was too slick to hold, when exhaustion finally broke through the panic. Then I looked down. The buzzing was gone. The fog in my head lifted like a curtain pulled back. His face was visible. There was no swarm. There were no insects. There was only my brother and what I had done to him. My mouth kept moving, quieter now, like the last words left in me were all I had. No more bugs. Story 3. I didn't know where else to put this. I already filed a police report, and my job knows what happened, but I can't stop thinking about it. I can't just hand it to the police and pretend I'm fine. Writing it out is the only way I can breathe right now. I'll start where I first noticed something was wrong. I always got to work early, not because I loved my job, but because being late stressed me out, and early meant I could park where I wanted. I usually parked far out in the lot where it was easier to pull out later, and where I didn't have to fight for a space. Then I'd stop by the same local cafe for my morning coffee. It was a small place with a cabin kind of feel, all wood and stone. And it always smelled like warm pastries and roasted beans. That coffee was the best part of my day. After that, I'd go into the office, swipe in, and sit down in my little cubicle. It was one of those open-floor offices where everyone pretends they have privacy because a fabric wall comes up to chest height. I'd been working there for about 3 years. I was due for a promotion, and I knew it. Still, I kept my head down, did my work, showed up, did what I was supposed to do. I didn't cause trouble. I didn't give anyone a reason to remember my name for the wrong thing. My best friend worked there too. For privacy, I'll call her Emily. She's actually the reason I got the job in the first place. She was the kind of person who could talk and work at the same time, which honestly confused me. She'd roll her chair over to my cubicle, lean against the wall, and chat like we were in a coffee shop instead of an office. And somehow she still finished everything before the deadline. That morning she showed up at my desk looking different. Not in a dramatic way, but enough to make me notice. Her arms were full of letters and papers, stacked so high it looked like she was hugging a messy nest. "Hey girl," she said, lifting her chin so I could hear her properly. "How are you?" "Bored, like always," I said. "You look like you're about to drop half a forest." She laughed, shifting the stack. "I know. I swear I'm carrying the whole tree, but if you're bored, I might know how to make your day a little more interesting." I leaned back in my chair. My coffee hadn't fully kicked in yet, and I would have taken any excuse to focus on something that wasn't my inbox. "Oh yeah? How?" She tilted her head, and I saw that look in her eyes. "Mischief. A couple of these are for you." "For me?" I frowned. She started digging through the pile and pulled out several envelopes. They were plain, but someone had decorated them. Big hearts, little hearts, hearts everywhere. On the front, instead of my name, they just said, "To you," like we were in some cheesy romance movie. My stomach did something small and uncomfortable. I didn't even have a good reason for it yet. It was just a feeling. Emily handed them over like it was a gift. "Go on," she said. "Open one." I picked the one with the most hearts and flipped it over. There was a brown smudge near the seal, like dirt or old makeup, maybe even dried coffee. It looked rubbed in, not spilled. Emily leaned closer, practically over my shoulder. So she whispered, "Who's the lucky guy?" I didn't answer. I opened the envelope and slid out what was inside. It was a napkin, a real napkin, like from a fast food place or a calf. One corner had been torn off where a label might have been. There were blotches on it, pale brown and bluish, like the writer's hand had been wet, or like something had dripped on it. The ink looked slightly warped in places, as if the person writing had pressed too hard or written while emotional. The note was handwritten in blue pen, and it was a short poem. "I've seen your head, I've seen your toes, I love you more than anyone knows. I've seen your hair, I've seen your eyes. I wish to speak to you, but I'm much too shy." Next to the last line was a little winking face. I stared at it for a second, then let out a laugh because it felt ridiculous. It felt like something Emily would do to mess with me. I looked up at her. "Wow, Emily, I didn't know you were a poet. Honestly, you could compete with the greats." She laughed too, then shook her head. "I know I could, but I didn't write it." That wiped the smile off my face. "You didn't?" I asked. "No," she said, and her expression shifted, like she was trying to decide if she should be worried or amused. "It came in with the rest of the office mail." I looked down at the envelopes in my hands. The hearts didn't feel cute anymore. They felt childish, but not in an innocent way, like someone trying very hard to look sweet. I didn't have a boyfriend. I hadn't for a while. Not because I was against it. I just hadn't met someone I actually clicked with. And none of my exes were the obsessive type. I couldn't think of anyone who would write something like this and then send it to my workplace. Emily nudged me. "If you don't want them, I'll keep them," she joked. "No," I said quickly, holding them close. "I'll take them. You've got enough to carry." She grinned like she'd won something, then rolled away to distribute the rest of the papers around the office. I tried to work, and somehow I did. I answered emails, filled out forms, did the normal boring tasks I always did. But the envelopes stayed in my desk drawer, and I kept thinking about them like they were alive in there. By the time I drove home, it was all I could think about. Who wrote that? Why me? How did they even get it into the office mail? When I got to my apartment, I fumbled with my keys like my hands didn't work right. My place wasn't great, but it was cheap, and cheap was what I could afford. The building always smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. My unit was on the 4th floor, and the hallway lights flickered in a way that made the walk feel longer than it should have been. Inside, I tossed my bag down and tried to act normal. I took a shower, hoping it would reset my brain. The water went hot for maybe a minute, then turned icy like it always did, because nothing in that building worked the way it should. When I got out, I realized I'd left the bathroom door open the whole time, and for some reason that made me feel stupidly exposed. My bedroom was messy. Clothes on the floor, half clean, half dirty, everything mixed together. I didn't even care. I just wanted my bed. My mattress was the one nice thing I owned, The one thing I'd spent real money on because I believed sleep was worth it. I got under the blankets, finally feeling a little calmer, and pulled the rest of the envelopes out. There were 10 notes total. Most of them were vague, the kind of creepy poetry that could apply to anyone if you squinted. Stuff about eyes and smiles and dreams. But as I kept reading, the tone shifted. The words got more personal, more specific. Like the writer wasn't imagining me, like they'd actually been watching. One note was inside a store-bought card. On the front, 2 cartoon dogs hugged under the words, "Us, forever and ever." The inside had another poem. After a hard day of work, I love to sleep, but I can't do it alone. I'm as shy as a sheep your red lips and your coffee-stained tongue make me. Feel so petite and young your favorite caramel drink keeps you little. Fingers pink, I love it when you talk to your blonde friend, and I imagine our lives together, which will never end to make you mine, is my secret. Endeavor, because then I can hug you forever and ever. Next to that last line, the writer had added, at the bottom of the card was a mark that looked like someone had pressed their mouth to it. Not lipstick. Something damp and ugly, like a first attempt at leaving a kiss, like they wanted to claim the paper. My skin went cold. Not the normal "this is creepy" kind of cold, but the kind that feels like your body is warning you. This person knew details. Emily was blonde. I wore red lipstick to work. I always got caramel coffee. They weren't guessing. The word hug in that poem didn't feel sweet. It felt like a threat. Forever and ever didn't sound romantic. It sounded like being trapped. I threw the notes into the trash like I could erase them that way. Then I lay in bed with the lights off, staring into the dark, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. Eventually, my exhaustion won, and I fell asleep even though I didn't want to. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing so hard it felt like it shook the bed. Emily had texted me. "Wanna grab coffee at your fave place? My treat." My fingers moved before my brain could overthink it. "Yeah, I need to talk to you about something." I got ready fast. Makeup, hair, clothes. I was late enough that I didn't even try to straighten my hair. I grabbed the notes from the trash, because suddenly I knew I needed proof. I walked out of my apartment squinting against the morning sun like it was too sharp. In the car, the mess was worse than I remembered. Clothes piled on the passenger side. Old receipts, a water bottle rolling under the seat. I threw the envelopes on top of a red tank top lying there, then drove to the cafe. On the way, I kept getting that feeling like someone was watching me. Not just one pair of eyes. It felt like a whole crowd, all focused on me. I kept checking the mirrors. No one obvious was behind me. Still, the feeling didn't go away. The cafe looked normal, safe, even. Logs and stone, warm window light, smoke curling from the chimney. Inside, it was the usual comfort. The smell of coffee beans, sugar, pastries, and the soft burn of the fireplace. Milk steamed. Music played. Someone called out orders. People laughed. For a second, my body loosened like it remembered what normal life felt like. Emily was already there, waving me over. I sat down, and she leaned forward with a smile. "So, how'd you sleep?" "Better than I thought," I said honestly. Then I nodded toward her. "What about you? Did you get your charts in on time?" "Yeah, stayed up late, but that's what coffee is for, right?" I glanced at the line for drinks. It was longer than usual, and I felt annoyed for a second, like my routine was being interrupted. Emily said, "Don't worry. I already ordered for both of us. You still get the same thing, right? Caramel latte, I said. Half and half. Extra sugar. Still got it, she said, proud like she'd memorized something important. Then her expression shifted. So, what did you want to talk about? The second she asked, it felt like the calf got quieter, like all the background noise moved farther away. My hands went to the envelopes under the table, and they felt heavier than paper should. It was like holding something dirty. I opened my mouth to tell her, but a barista called her name loudly from the counter. Sorry, Emily said, standing. Give me 1 second. Let me grab our drinks. She walked away, leaving me alone with the notes and the sudden feeling that I was exposed. I looked around the calf, trying not to be paranoid. People were talking, typing on laptops, smiling. No one looked strange. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that whoever wrote those notes might be close enough to hear me breathe. Emily came back and slid my coffee onto the table. I stared at it like it wasn't mine anymore, like it had been touched. She studied my face. Hey, you okay? You look really nervous. I swallowed. Emily, I need to show you something. I pulled the envelopes out and put them on the table. Her eyes widened. Wait, are these the notes from yesterday? Yeah, I said. I read all of them. There were 10. And you have no idea who wrote them? No. I handed her the dog card, the one that made my stomach twist. Read this one. Emily opened it carefully, like she expected something to jump out. Her eyes moved across the lines, and I watched her face change as she reached the parts about my coffee, my lipstick, her hair. When she finished, she shut the card hard and looked away like she wanted to wipe her hands. What the fuck? She said quietly. What should I do? My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. She leaned in, serious now, the joking gone. We need to figure out who's doing this and call the cops. This is stalker stuff. I don't even know where to start, I said. All we know is they know me. And they know you. Emily stared at the tabletop for a moment, thinking. Then her face lit up like she'd just solved a puzzle. Elijah. Elijah? I repeated. The security guy, she said. He can watch the cameras. If someone comes in again and drops something off, we'll see them. And if you get another note, we can give it straight to the police. What if they stop? I asked. Emily shrugged. Then the problem stops too, right? I hated that she had a point. We looked at the time and both realized we were running late. Emily grabbed her coffee, stood up, and said, I'll talk to Elijah when we get in. Don't worry. Take this, I said, handing her the dog card. She slid it into her bag and hurried out. Even though I needed to leave, I went to the bathroom first. The calf bathrooms were in a small hallway. I punched in the code, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. While I was washing my hands afterward, I heard something from the other side of the wall. A loud, intense sound, like someone moaning. It wasn't a normal quiet noise either. It was so strong and ugly that it made my skin crawl. It sounded too close, like whoever it was didn't care who heard. I walked out fast, face hot with discomfort, and went back toward the table. My coffee was gone. The cup, the drink, everything, just gone. On any other day, I would have been furious. But in that moment, I didn't even feel angry. I felt warned, like someone had just touched my life and proved they could. I gathered the notes, shoved them under my arm, and left. At work, I went straight to the security office. Elijah was there. sitting at his desk, half watching monitors, half looking like he was trying to stay awake. He was a big guy, calm, the kind of person who made you feel safer just by being near. "Hey, Elijah," I said. He looked up. "Hey, Sarah, don't worry. Emily already told me. I'll keep an eye out for that freak." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. I really appreciate it. The day dragged. Without my usual coffee, I felt slow and foggy. I tried the office coffee, which tasted like burnt water, but it was better than nothing. I dumped sugar into it until it was barely drinkable, and even then it didn't help much. I kept thinking about the notes. I kept thinking about my coffee disappearing. I kept thinking about that sound in the bathroom hallway and how it didn't feel random. When the workday finally ended, I was so tired I could barely feel relief. Emily stopped by my cubicle to tell me it was time to go. I stood up and hugged her, and she hugged me back tight, like she wanted me to feel grounded. "Call me when you get home," she said. "I will," I promised. I walked out to my car, already reaching for my keys, already thinking about my bed. Then I saw something on the passenger seat. A crumpled napkin. My throat tightened. I hadn't left that there. I picked it up with 2 fingers like it might bite me. As I unrolled it, a small USB drive slipped out into my lap. On the napkin, someone had written in crude, messy handwriting, "Your voice is so sexy, especially when you're talking to your little friend." I'm a little upset she doesn't seem to like me, but I'll let it slide because you're cute, and because it seems like you really admire my work. God, I wish I could be with you. Compared to you, you'd see me as a bug, something small to crush. But I don't mind getting crushed by you. Then under that, P.S. Thank you for the coffee. I wish you had a couple sips. Then it would be like we kissed. My hands went numb. It felt like static crawling across my fingers. My face twisted in disgust so strong I didn't even recognize myself. I slammed the car door and marched back into the building, straight to Elijah. "Elijah," I said, breathless, "can you check the parking lot cameras for me?" He sat up. "Yeah, what happened?" I held out the napkin and the USB. This was in my car. While I was working, his face hardened. "Jesus Christ. I don't know what's on it," I said. "I came straight to you." Elijah didn't hesitate. He plugged the USB into his laptop. It looked like a gaming laptop, the kind with lights and a heavy build, like he brought it because security work could get boring. There was one video file, an MP4. He clicked play. At first, it was mostly background noise, a hiss, a faint grinding sound. Then I heard music, soft but clear enough to recognize. Glenn Campbell, and then the sound of someone calling a name, the exact way the baristas did. My blood turned cold. It was the calf. Then I heard Emily's voice, recorded from a distance, but close enough. "So, how'd you sleep?" And then, right after that, my own voice answered. Better than I thought. It was like hearing a stranger pretend to be me. Except it was perfect. Every little pause, every tone, every laugh. My stomach rolled so hard I barely made it to the trash can before I threw up. It was violent and humiliating, the kind of sick where your whole body feels like it's trying to reject something poisonous. Elijah paused the video, but I shook my head, wiping my mouth. "Keep going," I croaked, even though I didn't want him to. He played the rest. It captured everything. My order, Emily's little joke, me pulling out the notes, Emily reading the card, then Emily saying she'd talk to Elijah, and then After a moment of muffled silence, the video caught the sound of someone using the bathroom in the distance. And then it came again. That awful moan, right next to the mic, loud and heavy, like the person was pressed close to whatever they were recording with, like they wanted the sound to be part of it. I gagged again and threw up what little was left. Elijah came over and held my hair back without a word, steady and firm like he'd done it before. When it finally stopped, I was shaking, knees weak, palms cold with sweat. Elijah's voice was tight. "I'm checking the footage." He pulled up the parking lot cameras and rewound the day. We watched, fast-forwarding through hours, looking for movement near my car. Eventually, Elijah stopped the video and leaned in. A hooded figure had approached my car. A man, it looked like, moving fast and low. He slipped something through the window. My stomach dropped. My window had been cracked open. I did that sometimes without thinking, especially when it was warm out. I'd done it today. The camera angle was too far to get a clear face, too grainy, too much distance. Elijah slammed his hand on the desk. "Damn it." "Still curled near the trash can," I whispered. "We can still report it, right?" "Yeah," he said. "Absolutely. I'll call the police. You need to go home. Lock your doors, and if you want, call someone to stay with you." He helped me stand, and I felt light, like my body wasn't fully attached to the ground. He walked me out to my car and looked around it carefully, checking the back seat, checking the floor, like he'd seen too many news stories. "You're good," he said. "Get home, and call me when you're inside." "Thank you," I told him, my voice cracked. "It means a lot," he nodded. "If you need somewhere else to stay, my wife and I can help. We'll figure something out." I wanted to say yes. I wanted to accept. But part of me clung to the idea that I could still handle my own life. "I think I'll be fine," I lied. He watched me drive away, phone already in his hand, probably calling the police. The drive home felt unreal. The sky darkened. Streetlights turned on. Every car behind me felt like it might be him. Every red light felt like a trap. My damaged nerves made everything feel louder than it should have been. The hum of the engine, the click of my turn signal, the scrape of my tires on the road. When I pulled into my apartment complex, the motion lights flicked on, washing the lot in pale yellow. A group of older residents stood near the stairs, smoking like they always did, their cigarettes glowing in the dark. The smoke hung heavy. One of them laughed, and for a second his mouth looked like a black hole in the night. I forced myself not to stare. I forced myself not to run. I climbed the stone stairs, each step echoing. On the first floor, I heard a TV. On the third, I heard people talking, plates clinking, normal dinner sounds. I couldn't tell if that made me feel safer or more exposed. If someone wanted to hurt you, did it help to have people nearby, or did it just mean there were more places for someone to hide? On the fourth floor, my floor, the hallway was quiet. I walked to my door, keys trembling in my hand, and the sound of the lock turning felt too loud. Inside, I flicked the lights on fast. The brightness hit my eyes. My place looked normal. Messy, small, mine. I drank water straight from a dirty glass in the sink because my mouth tasted like acid. Then I turned the lights off again, trying to settle down, and went into my bedroom. The act wasn't working. It was hot and still. I tiptoed around clothes on the floor and fell into bed like it was the only safe place left in the world. I closed my eyes. I drifted into that strange half-sleep where your brain is still awake enough to scare you, I saw a shape in my mind, a person with arms open wide, stepping toward me like they were going to embrace me. The arms closed around my chest. At first, it didn't hurt. It didn't feel good either. It just felt wrong, like being held by something that didn't understand what a person was. I tried to pull away in my dream. Then I woke up. Something heavy was on top of me, flesh and weight pressing me down. Arms, real arms. One across my chest, one pinning my legs, a strong grip that didn't belong in my bedroom. I couldn't breathe properly. Panic hit me so hard my vision sparkled at the edges. I fought. I twisted. The hold tightened. I don't know where the strength came from, but I forced my head down and bit into the arm across my chest. I bit like an animal, like there was nothing else left to do. A muffled scream burst out, thin and sudden, and the grip loosened just enough. That was all I needed. I ripped myself free and scrambled off the bed, stumbling toward the door. Behind me, the mattress shifted in a way a mattress shouldn't. Something moved at the side of the bed, like a body sliding out of a place it had been hiding. I heard a thud, then another. I slammed my bedroom door behind me, but something hit it from the other side and it flew open so hard it almost bounced off the wall. I ran for my front door and threw it open. Bare feet slapped the hallway floor. I turned left for the stairs, taking them too fast, nearly falling. Behind me, heavy footsteps followed, fast and close, matching me step for step. Motion lights snapped on as I tore down each level, but no apartment doors opened, no voices, no smokers at the bottom now, just empty space and my own breath ripping in and out of my chest. I burst into the parking lot and ran to my car. My keys shook so badly I dropped them once, then scooped them up and jammed the fob until the lights flashed and the locks clicked. I threw myself into the driver's seat. The car started with a rough groan, and my headlights swung across the lot. And I saw him. He was about my height, maybe a little taller, around 5'11". Brown hair. A long beard that looked oddly clean, like he took care of it. His skin was pale in the headlights, and his eyes looked wide and bright with something that wasn't love at all. It was hunger, it was obsession, and he was wearing my red tank top. For half a second, my mind didn't accept it. Then it clicked like a knife sliding into place. The tank top I'd had in my car, the clothes in my apartment, the cold shower, the little signs I ignored because I told myself I was imagining things. I glanced at my passenger seat. It was empty. The notes weren't there anymore. I slammed the car into reverse, but he lunged forward and threw himself against my driver's side window. The glass cracked under the impact. "Let me love you," he screamed, loud enough to cut through the engine noise. His hands pounded the window. When that didn't work, he slammed his forehead into it. Blood smeared across the spiderweb cracks, and he looked like he didn't even feel it, like pain was part of what he wanted. I hit the brakes hard, then punched the gas, jerking the car backward and sideways. He stumbled, lost his grip, and fell away from the window. I swung the wheel, tires screeching, and shot out of the lot, barely staying on the road. My window was cracked so badly I had to keep looking around it, my neck stiff with fear, my eyes darting between the road and the rear-view mirror. In the mirror, I saw him get up and run after me for a few steps. Then the darkness swallowed him. I drove straight to the police station. I didn't stop. I didn't go back. I didn't even fully understand what I'd just survived. My hands stayed locked on the wheel like if I let go the whole world would fall apart. Since then, I've filed the report. I gave them everything. The notes, the USB, the footage. My job knows. Emily knows. I'm staying in a hotel now, riding this far away from my apartment, far away from my bed, far away from the place where someone lived with me without my knowledge for who knows how long. I still don't understand how he got in. I don't understand how long he'd been there. I don't understand how many times he watched me sleep, or what else he touched, or what he took, or how close I came to never getting out. I only know this every night now, before I even think about sleeping. I check the mattress, every side, every corner, every inch, because I learned the worst lesson possible. Sometimes the thing that's watching you isn't outside the window. Sometimes it's already in the room. Story 4. Working 19-hour days doesn't just make you tired. It empties you out from the inside, like somebody scooped out everything human and left only a thin shell that still walks, still talks, still nods at people when it has to. By the time midnight comes, you aren't really thinking anymore. You're doing things because you've done them 100 times. You move by habit. Your body keeps going on leftover energy, cheap tea that tastes like metal, and that last little spark of fear that says, if you stop, everything will fall apart. That summer was 2005, and it was the roughest stretch of my life. I was living in a tiny apartment that always felt too hot and too loud, even when it was quiet. It had one small fan that mostly moved warm air around, and the walls held on to the day's heat like they were made of a stove. Every morning I left at 6, before the sun had fully settled into the sky. Every night I came back at 1, sometimes 2. I did it so long that days stopped feeling like days. Everything blended into one long, sweaty line of hours. That night was like most nights back then. My head was pounding in that deep way that sits behind your eyes, the kind of headache that makes light feel sharp and sounds feel far away. My shirt, a cheap formal one I kept wearing because I didn't have money for new clothes, was stuck to my back with sweat. My feet hurt from stiff shoes. My mouth tasted like old tea and toothpaste. Even the air felt thick, like breathing through a cloth. The commuter train dropped me at the station around 1:30 in the morning. If you've never stood on an Indian railway platform at that hour, it's hard to explain the feeling. In the daytime, it's chaos. People everywhere. Noise, shouting, vendors, whistles, phones ringing, engines growling, luggage being dragged, children crying. Everybody pushing and moving like water in a crowded pipe. At night, after the last trains leave, all of that vanishes so suddenly it feels wrong, like somebody turned off the world. The platform was almost empty, just a few sleepy figures sitting on benches, and one security guard leaning on a wall as if his bones were tired too. The big overhead lamps buzzed constantly. They cast a yellow light that made everything look sick, like the station itself had a fever. Shadows pooled in the corners. The tracks looked like long black cuts in the ground. Every so often, a dog would walk through the frame of light and then disappear again. I remember thinking, as I came down the stairs toward the exit, that the station didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a stage after the show is over. The props are still there, but all the actors have gone home, and you're not supposed to be watching it in silence. Outside, the air was still hot. That's what I always hated about summer nights there. In some places, night brings relief. In that city, the heat just sat low and heavy, as if the roads and buildings were giving it back. There was a smell of dust, stale smoke, and something sour coming from a drain nearby. My neighborhood was too far to walk, especially in the state I was in. Even if I could have managed it, it would have taken forever. And the streets at that hour weren't the kind you wanted to wander through alone. So I did what I always did. I headed for the taxi stand. The taxi lot sat a little to the side of the station. In the day it was packed. A long, messy line of black and yellow cabs, drivers calling out destinations, bargaining, smoking, joking, yelling at each other, waiting for their turn. At night it looked abandoned. Most of the taxis were gone. Only a few were left, parked like tired animals that didn't have the strength to move. My route had its own section at the back of the lot. I hated that. It was always the farthest corner, right up against a high brick wall. Beyond that wall was an overgrown, vacant plot, the kind of empty land that turns into a jungle when nobody cares for it. The plants were tall and wild. There were broken bits of concrete half buried in weeds. In the daytime, people ignored it. At night, it felt like it was watching you. When I reached the back, I saw there were only 4 taxis left in the line. 4 cabs standing under the buzzing lights with long shadows behind them and no other people nearby. The space felt too open, too quiet. Even my footsteps sounded loud on the cracked asphalt. I went to the first taxi. The driver was slumped over, eyes half shut. He looked like he'd been awake for 2 days. Northern Colony, lane number 4? I asked. My voice came out rough, like sandpaper. I cleared my throat and waited. He didn't even lift his head fully. He clicked his tongue in that sharp, annoyed way some people do and waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. No words, just dismissal. I stood there for a second, trying to swallow my anger. In that moment, I was too tired to argue, too tired to beg. It wasn't even about the money, because I was paying a normal fare. It was about being treated like I was nothing, like my need to get home didn't matter at all. I walked to the second taxi. The driver looked at me, just briefly, and shook his head before I could finish speaking. Same thing. No explanation, no courtesy, just no. My vision felt a little blurry around the edges. The lights seemed harsher. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand and tried to tell myself I just needed to get into a cab, sit down, and let my body rest for 15 minutes. That was all I wanted. A seat, a ride, a bed. I walked up to the third taxi. Its windows were rolled all the way up. The glass looked smudged, like someone had dragged a dirty cloth across it. Inside, I could see the driver's shape in the front seat, but something about the posture made me slow down. The body was turned away from the window, angled toward the empty passenger seat beside the driver, like the person was having a silent conversation with nobody. I leaned closer. The overhead light reflected off the glass, making it hard to see details, but I could still tell the figure wasn't moving. Not even the small movements you'd expect from someone breathing or shifting. It looked stiff, like a mannequin. I knocked with my knuckles, light at first. "Hey," I said, "are you on duty? I need to go north." No response. I knocked again, harder. The sound was loud, sharp, and it echoed in that empty corner of the lot. "Hello? Are you taking fares?" Still nothing. For a few seconds I just stared, waiting for any sign. A head turning, a hand moving. Anything, but the figure didn't react at all, and I felt something in me snap. Not in a dramatic way. More like a thread breaking. I'd had too many hours of work, too much disrespect, too little sleep. My brain stopped acting like a reasonable adult and started acting like a cornered animal. I slapped my open palm against the roof of the taxi hard enough to sting. "Look," I shouted, my voice cracking from exhaustion and anger. "If you want the fare, open the door. If you don't, then go home. Stop wasting my time." The words came out harsher than I meant. I even remember the exact heat of my own voice, the way it sounded wrong in the quiet air, like I'd thrown a rock into still water. I sucked in a breath, ready to storm over to the fourth cab. But in the corner of my eye, I saw movement inside the third taxi. The driver was turning around. It didn't look like a normal person turning to see who was knocking. It was slow and stiff, like a door on rusty hinges. The head seemed to come around in small jerks, and the body followed in a way that made my stomach tighten. For half a second I tried to tell myself it only looked strange because I was tired, because the light was bad, because my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then the face came into view, and my body forgot how to breathe. The figure was wearing a white silk cerise. It looked clean, almost perfect, the fabric catching the yellow light in a smooth, pale sheen. But over it was a white lab coat, too big and dirty, like it had been worn for years and never washed properly. The coat looked wrong on top of the cerise, like two stories jammed together that didn't belong. The figure leaned forward a little, closer to the window, and that's when I realized the face wasn't just shadowed. It was black, not hard to see, not covered by darkness. It was a flat, matte blackness where the features should have been, like someone had erased them. And around that black face was hair, bright white hair, wild and floating, as if it was underwater or caught in a slow wind that I couldn't feel. My first thought was that it had to be a trick of light, a mask, something, because my mind refused to accept the idea that a face could look like that. My brain scrambled for explanations the way it does when it's trying to protect you from panic. Maybe it's someone wearing a veil. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe it's a beggar with a weird costume. Maybe I'm so tired I'm hallucinating. But my legs wouldn't move. My knees felt locked. I could feel my heart beating hard in my throat like my body was trying to escape through my mouth. Slowly, the thing smiled. The mouth appeared as the lips pulled back, and what I saw made my stomach turn cold. Teeth, wet and red. Not just stained, not just darkened. Red like fresh blood, glossy under the light. And it wasn't sitting neatly in the mouth either. There were too many teeth, or they were too close together. The smile looked crowded wrong. I tried to force logic again. People chew pan here, beetle nut, it stains the mouth. You see red lips, red teeth, spit on the pavement. It's common. I told myself that, almost like a prayer. But then I saw it drip. A thin line of red slid down from the mouth, slow and thick, and for a second it clung to the chin area, and then it disappeared into the blackness, as if the black face swallowed it. I felt a sound start to rise in my own throat, a helpless noise, but before it came out, the thing inside the cab made a sound first. Even through the rolled-up window, I heard it clearly. It started as sobbing, wet, ragged, broken sobbing, like someone crying so hard they can't get enough air. It was full of pain. It was the kind of crying you hear at funerals, when people can't hold themselves together anymore. The sound crawled under my skin. And then it changed. The sobbing lifted higher, stretched and twisted into laughter. Not normal laughter. It grew into a loud, shaking, hysterical cackle that felt like it was vibrating the air. But the strangest part was that it didn't stop being a sob. It was both at the same time, crying and laughing mixed together, like two voices fighting inside the same throat. That broke whatever spell had frozen me. I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly fell. My heel caught a crack in the asphalt and pain shot up my ankle, but I didn't care. I swore, a raw string of curses, the kind you don't plan, the kind that just explodes out of you when you're terrified and furious and helpless. I turned and ran toward the fourth taxi. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost missed the door handle. I yanked it open and threw myself into the back seat. The seat was covered in cheap Rexine that stuck to sweaty skin, and it smelled like old heat and cigarette smoke. I didn't sit properly. I just collapsed in a heap, half sideways, like a sack of clothes. "Drive," I gasped. "Drive. Just drive." The driver of the fourth taxi didn't ask where. He didn't ask why I looked like I'd seen death. He didn't say anything at all. He just slammed the car into gear and pulled out hard, the tires whining slightly as we left the lot. As we moved, I twisted around, desperate not to look back but unable to stop myself. Through the rear window, I caught a glimpse of the taxi stand corner shrinking away under the lights. The third taxi was still there, still in its spot. I couldn't see the face anymore, but I felt, deep in my bones, that it was watching the road we took, like it could follow without moving. The driver's cab was quiet except for the engine and the uneven rattle of the old car. My whole body was shaking, not just my hands. It was like my muscles were vibrating, trying to burn off the shock. The driver was an older man, face-lined and tired, chewing on a toothpick like it was the only thing keeping him steady. At a red light, the street light passed over his face, and I saw that he looked pale, almost gray. His eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror, meeting mine. He reached over without looking and tossed a half-empty plastic bottle of water into the back. It landed in my lap and sloshed. "Drink," he said. His voice was quiet, flat, but not unkind. I fumbled with the cap and took a few shaky swallows. The water was warm, but it helped a little. My throat was so tight it hurt to swallow. He kept driving, hands tight on the wheel. Then, still looking forward, he spoke again. "You yelled at her," he said. "It wasn't a question." It was a statement, like he already knew. I couldn't answer. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My heart was still beating too fast, and every time I tried to form words, I could hear that mixed sobbing laughter in my head. The driver's jaw worked around the toothpick. "You shouldn't have raised your voice." The way he said it wasn't scolding. It was fear, like someone warning you after you've stepped too close to a cliff edge. We passed through empty streets. Shops shut, shutters down. A few stray dogs sleeping near closed tea stalls. The city looked different at that hour, stripped down to its bones. A couple of motorbikes went by like ghosts, their headlights swinging. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rang softly, probably from a night watchman doing rounds, and the sound made me shiver even more. After a long moment, the driver finally spoke again, as if he'd decided the silence was worse. Years ago, he muttered, there was a person who used to stay around the station. A transgender person. Everyone knew them. Mind wasn't stable. But they didn't harm anybody. He swallowed and cleared his throat. His voice got rough for a second, then steadied. They wore a white saree, always, and some old lab coat they'd found somewhere. big coat, hanging off them. Used to feed the stray dogs near the back of the lot. Sat there quietly. Sometimes talked to themselves, but harmless. I held the bottle with both hands like it was an anchor. The plastic crinkled under my grip. The driver continued, words coming out like he was forcing them through his teeth. One night, some drunk men came out of the bar nearby. The kind who think they own the world when they've had a few drinks. They started shouting at that person, making jokes, cursing, calling them names. His hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles pale in the passing light. And then they beat them, he said, voice dropping. Right there by the wall, on the pavement. They didn't stop. They kept going until he trailed off for a second, smashed their face in. The car felt smaller suddenly, like the story had filled it up and pushed the air out. I could hear the hum of the tires. I could hear my own breathing, thin and uneven. The driver took a sharp breath, like he hated what he was saying but needed to finish. After that, people said strange things happened. Dogs barking for no reason. Drivers refusing to park in that third spot. Some nights, somebody would sit in that cab and just face the wrong way, like waiting. He glanced at me in the mirror again. We know to leave that third place empty after midnight. My mouth was dry again. Why does it? I started, and my voice cracked. I swallowed and tried again. Why did it turn around? The driver's eyes didn't leave the road. Only when someone shouts at them, he said. Only when someone speaks like those men spoke. He paused, then added softly, maybe they think you are one of them. I leaned back against the seat and stared at the ceiling of the cab. The fabric above was sagging, stained from years of heat. I tried to hold on to something normal, something solid. The driver's story had a shape to it, like an explanation. But it didn't help. It only made the image in my mind sharper. That black face, that white hair, that wet red smile. The rest of the ride passed like a dream you can't control. I remember street corners I recognized, but they looked wrong in the yellow light. I remember the driver taking a shortcut through a quieter road, and how my body tensed when we passed any dark patch between streetlights. I kept expecting to see another taxi behind us, following. I kept expecting to hear that sound again. When we finally reached my lane, I told him to stop near the entrance. My hands were still trembling. I pulled a crumpled 500 rupee note from my pocket and shoved it into the front, not waiting for change. He didn't argue. He didn't even thank me. He just nodded once, a small, heavy nod, like we both understood there were things you didn't talk about too much. I stepped out and the night air hit me like a wall. My legs felt weak, and for a second the world tilted. I gripped the gate for balance and forced myself to walk inside. By the time I reached my apartment door, my skin felt too hot, like the heat was coming from inside my body instead of outside. My vision narrowed. The hallway light stretched into a long smear. I remember fumbling with the key. I remember thinking, I just need to lie down. Then everything went black. My family told me later that I collapsed right in the doorway. Someone heard the sound and ran out. They said my forehead was burning. They took my temperature and it was 104 degrees. I was barely responding. They called for help and got me to a hospital. I spent 4 days there on an IV drip. The doctors said it was a viral infection combined with severe exhaustion. They weren't wrong about the exhaustion. I'd been destroying my body for months, and viruses are everywhere. It could have been that. It would make sense. But even in the hospital, half delirious, I kept seeing that face when I closed my eyes. Not as a vague nightmare, as a clear picture. That black nothingness where eyes should be. That white hair moving like it had its own life. The mouth pulling open into a smile that wasn't meant for the living. For days I didn't talk much. My throat hurt and my voice sounded wrong to me, like it belonged to someone else. My family thought I was just weak from fever. I didn't tell them what happened, partly because I wasn't sure they'd believe me, and partly because I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would make it more real. Time moved on, the way it always does. I got out of that phase of my life eventually. I found steadier work, better hours. I moved to a more comfortable place. I started sleeping like a person again. The memory of that night didn't disappear, but it got pushed into the back of my mind, filed away under things I don't touch. It's been almost 20 years now. I haven't taken a late-night commuter train in more than a decade. I haven't stood on that platform at 1:30 a.m. since. I haven't gone near that taxi stand corner. Sometimes, in the middle of a busy day, I'll remember the buzzing halogen lights and feel my stomach tighten for no reason. But then a meeting starts. A phone rings. Life continues, and the moment passes. Tonight, it didn't pass. I'm writing this because I can't sleep. My current apartment is in a quieter area, the kind of street where people park neatly and the loudest sound at night is usually an air conditioner turning on. From my window, I can see the road clearly. A single streetlight stands across from my building, bright and steady, making a pale circle on the pavement. About an hour ago, I got up to get a glass of water. The apartment was dark, everyone else asleep. The floor was cool under my feet. I filled the glass, drank, and out of habit, I looked out the window. The street was empty. No people, no moving cars, no dogs, just quiet asphalt and the streetlight's glow. Except for one taxi parked directly under that light. It wasn't one of the local ride-share cars or a normal sedan. It was an old-style taxi, the kind you don't see much around here anymore. The windows were rolled all the way up. The car sat perfectly still, engine off like it had been placed there on purpose. And the driver was sitting in the front seat, not facing the road, facing the back. Story 5, there's a trail near my house that runs through the quiet edges of town and then slips into the woods. Now that the weather has turned warm and the days stretch longer, I've started taking walks in the afternoon again. The air feels soft on the skin, and the light is kinder than it was in winter. I walk for the movement and for the way it clears my head, but I do not go into the woods anymore. You could almost feel when something was about to go wrong out there. The farther you walked past the last houses, the rougher the trail became. The packed dirt turned uneven. Roots rose up through the ground like old fingers. Nobody seemed to bother keeping that part maintained. It was as if the path simply gave up trying to stay neat once the trees closed in. It was beautiful in its own wild way. Everything grew free and unchecked. Tall trees towered overhead, and their branches locked together into a thick green canopy that kept the trail in permanent shade. The brush on either side grew dense and tangled. You could never see very far in any direction. Once you stepped past a certain point, it felt like you had left the rest of the world behind. The sounds of cars and distant voices faded until there was only the forest. And the weird, wild sounds of that place were almost like music at first. The soft rustling of the breeze through leaves, the bright calls of birds high above. Somewhere out there a stream wandered between the trees. and in a few spots it came close enough to the trail that you could hear the water moving over stones. Those were the sounds you expected. Those were the ones that felt right. But you could also hear something you shouldn't. You might not notice it right away. I didn't. I was on the trail one afternoon, just past the place where the pavement gave way to dirt. The sun was high, but the canopy kept the heat from pressing down too hard. Somewhere above me, nesting birds were making a racket over a hawk that had drifted too close. Out to my left, a woodpecker was hammering away at some stubborn piece of bark. The sharp, steady rattle of its beak carried clearly through the quiet air. I kept walking. The hawk gave one last screech and vanished into the upper branches, empty-taloned. The woodpecker kept working, still just to my left. Shadows crawled slowly across the path as the sun moved. Further ahead, a covered bridge waited, where the stream came close, and if I listened carefully, I could already hear the water running before I saw it. I slowed my pace without meaning to. Something felt off. There were no more birds singing, no cicadas, no crickets, none of the usual soft chorus that always filled the woods in the afternoon. The only sound left was that woodpecker still rattling away just to my left. That did not seem right. I should have been well past the tree it had been working on. The sound had not moved. It stayed exactly where it had been relative. There's a trail near my house that runs through the quiet edges of town and then slips into the woods. Now that the weather has turned warm and the days stretch longer, I've started taking walks in the afternoon again. The air feels soft on the skin, and the light is kinder than it was in winter. I walk for the movement and for the way it clears my head. But I do not go into the woods anymore. You could almost feel when something was about to go wrong out there. The farther you walked past the last houses, the rougher the trail became. The packed dirt turned uneven. Roots rose up through the ground like old fingers. Nobody seemed to bother keeping that part maintained. It was as if the path simply gave up trying to stay neat once the trees closed in. It was beautiful in its own wild way. Everything grew free and unchecked. Tall trees towered overhead and their branches locked together into a thick green canopy that kept the trail in permanent shade. The brush on either side grew dense and tangled. You could never see very far in any direction. Once you stepped past a certain point, it felt like you had left the rest of the world behind. The sounds of cars and distant voices faded until there was only the forest. And the weird, wild sounds of that place were almost like music at first. The soft rustling of the breeze through leaves. The bright calls of birds high above. Somewhere out there a stream wandered between the trees, and in a few spots it came close enough to the trail that you could hear the water moving over stones. Those were the sounds you expected. Those were the ones that felt right. But you could also hear something you shouldn't. You might not notice it right away. I didn't. I was on the trail one afternoon, just past the place where the pavement gave way to dirt. The sun was high, but the canopy kept the heat from pressing down too hard. Somewhere above me, nesting birds were making a racket over a hawk that had drifted too close. Out to my left, a woodpecker was hammering away at some stubborn piece of bark. The sharp, steady rattle of its beak carried clearly through the quiet air. I kept walking. The hawk gave one last screech and vanished into the upper branches, empty-taloned. The woodpecker kept working, still just to my left. Shadows crawled slowly across the path as the sun moved. Further ahead, a covered bridge waited where the stream came close, and if I listened carefully, I could already hear the water running before I saw it. I slowed my pace without meaning to. Something felt off. There were no more birds singing, no cicadas, No crickets. None of the usual soft chorus that always filled the woods in the afternoon. The only sound left was that woodpecker still rattling away just to my left. That did not seem right. I should have been well past the tree it had been working on. The sound had not moved. It stayed exactly where it had been relative to me, even though I had kept walking. More confused than curious, I stopped and turned to look out into the trees. The hair on the back of my neck stood up all at once. People say your brain can tell when something is watching you even if you never see it with your eyes. Something out there was pressing hard on that old instinct. I held my breath and scanned the forest as if the whole place were looking back at me. I never saw any woodpecker in the branches. My eyes dropped from the trunks down into the brush. That was when I saw it. At first I thought I was looking at a body, something small and thin and wrong, half hidden from the waist down in the tangled green. It was completely still. Swirls and streaks like wood grain covered every inch of its skin. Its head was smooth and bare like a skull that had been carved carefully from dark walnut. The eyes were large and bulging and never blinked. They looked like they had been painted onto glass marbles and then set into the hollow sockets. The mouth had no lips. The teeth were nearly human, yellow and worn flat from use, and they sat bare and open as if the thing were about to speak. It stared straight at me with those dead eyes. Then it opened and closed its jaw. The sound that came out was exactly the same as a woodpecker hammering on stubborn bark. I learned something about myself that day. When the choice is fight or flight, I am a flyer. I turned and ran. Gray dust kicked up behind my shoes as I tore back up the trail. I looked over my shoulder only once. The wooden man ducked low into the brush and vanished from sight. I could not see it anymore, but I knew without any doubt that it was following. The rattle stayed right with me, just behind and a little to the side. It moved through the thickets and the tall grass, keeping perfect pace no matter how hard I pushed. My lungs burned. My legs felt heavy and light at the same time. Every time the brush thinned for a moment, I caught awful flashes of it whipping between the leaves, jaw still working, teeth still clicking. The paved part of the trail finally came into view. The sound was right in my ear now. It felt louder with every step. If the wooden man could breathe, I am sure I would have felt the air of it on the back of my neck. Then, the pain came. A sharp sting exploded on the side of my head. Those yellow teeth clamped down hard on the edge of my ear. I swung my arm wildly to knock it away, but the sudden movement threw me off balance. I went down hard. The asphalt met me like a rough tool. My knee skidded and opened. Both palms scraped raw and left smears of blood on the ground. I threw my arms over my head and waited for the next bite. Dust settled around me. The chattering had stopped. "Are you okay?" Sweat stung my eyes as I looked up. Two joggers stood a few yards away. Their faces showed real concern. I pushed myself up on shaking legs and wiped my hands on the front of my shirt. That hurt more than I expected. The joggers waited in silence while I turned and stared back down the trail. There was nothing. Only a single set of panicked footprints leading out of the woods and onto the pavement. "I think so," I managed. I thought. I stopped. If I told them what I had seen, they would think I had lost my mind. "I just overdid it," I said instead. One of them pointed. "Your head's bleeding." I reached up and found a small, clean notch cut into the cartilage of my ear. The skin around it was already sticky. "Oh," I said. The pause seemed to make them more uneasy. I just scraped my ear on the way down. That's all. They stayed long enough to be sure I could stand without falling again. Then they continued on their way, glancing back once or twice as if they were still not entirely convinced. I limped home the long way, keeping to the open streets, and cleaned the wounds as carefully as I could once I was inside. That evening I sat and tried to make sense of what had happened. The joggers had seen nothing unusual. In all the years people have walked that trail, I have never heard anyone mention a chattering man in the woods. Yet I was certain something terrible was living out there among the trees, something that could wait without moving and mimic the exact sound of a bird. Something that had followed me out of the shadows and taken a piece of me before it let me go. And now it has had a taste.